March 9, 1945, Tokyo. The clock was nearing 10 p.m. when the first air raid sirens began to sound. Most people were used to them by now. Small bombing raids had come and gone before. They never lasted long, so most of the city stayed calm. Some families went to their shelters, others stayed in bed. No one knew that tonight would be different. Over 300 American B-29 bombers were already in the air, flying north from the Mariana Islands, from Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. Each was packed with clusters of M69 incendiary bombs, small cylinders filled with jellied gasoline that burned hotter than anything Japan had faced before. The man in charge was General Curtis LeMay. He had just taken command of the XXI Bomber Command and ordered a complete change in tactics. Until now, American bombers flew high and tried to hit factories. The cold air and strong winds made their bombing inaccurate. LeMay's plan was brutal and simple: fly low, drop fire, and burn Japan's wooden cities to the ground. That night, his crews were told to strip the B-29s of guns and armor to make room for more fuel and bombs. They would fly at 5,000 to 9,000 feet, barely above the city, to avoid radar and deliver maximum destruction. Tokyo was dark, its lights blacked out by order of the government. The sky was clear, the wind strong from the north. Conditions were perfect for fire to spread. Over 1 million people lived in the districts that lay in the bombers' path. Most of them were asleep when the first formation crossed the coast. The first wave of 334 B-29s flew in at low altitude, engines roaring steady and deep. From above, the crews could already see the faint outline of Tokyo Bay. They had been flying for 7 hours over open ocean, using only stars and radar to navigate. LeMay's plan divided the city into zones, the working-class eastern wards where homes were packed tightly together, built from wood and paper. These districts were the target, not military bases. The goal was to destroy the production heart of the city, the small factories, workshops, and warehouses hidden inside neighborhoods. At 11:58 p.m., the first planes reached Tokyo. They carried magnesium marker flares to guide the bombers behind them. The Japanese radar network detected the approach, but too late. Sirens went off across the city just as the first bomb bays opened. Down below, anti-aircraft crews scrambled to their guns. They had few shells and little coordination. The guns fired wildly into the dark, too low, too slow. Japanese fighter planes tried to take off, but the smoke and confusion made it impossible to form any defense. The B-29s came in waves, each flight following the marker fires that spread across the city. Pilots described the view as terrifying and unreal. From altitude, Tokyo looked like a black ocean, waiting to be set alight. The Pathfinder planes started the attack by dropping hundreds of magnesium and napalm bombs in X-shaped patterns over the eastern wards of the city, mainly Shitamachi, Honjo, and Fukagawa. These markers were the signal for the rest of the fleet. Within minutes, entire blocks were burning. The M69 bombs were small but deadly. Each cluster opened in midair, releasing dozens of smaller cylinders that burst into flames when they hit the ground. The liquid fire splashed onto walls, rooftops, and people. Everything it touched ignited. Strong winds carried the flames down the narrow streets. The wood and paper houses acted like kindling. The fire moved faster than anyone could run. Within 15 minutes, the first districts were gone. As more planes arrived, they dropped thousands of bombs into the growing sea of fire. Each bomb created a new ignition point. The wind turned those points into lines, and the lines became one continuous wall of flame. The sound was deafening. Explosions, wind, the hum of engines overhead, and the constant crackling of the fire. The temperature on the ground climbed to unbearable levels. People rushed into rivers and canals, hopping to escape. The smell of burning wood and oil spread through the city. By midnight, the markers had done their work. The heart of Tokyo was now one vast target, visible to every bomber in the sky. When the second and third waves of B-29s arrived, Tokyo was already burning. They dropped their loads into the glowing city below. The fires merged into something far beyond ordinary destruction. It became a firestorm, a living furnace that fed on itself. The air grew hotter by the minute. The flames pulled oxygen from every direction, creating hurricane-strength winds that tore through the streets. Roofs lifted off, walls collapsed, and fire leapt from house to house faster than a man could blink. The temperature rose above 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Asphalt melted. The heat twisted metal and shattered glass. Firefighters tried to fight back, but their pumps ran dry when the city's water system failed. The few fire breaks that existed were quickly crossed by flying embers. People ran in every direction, carrying children, buckets, anything. Those who stayed in bomb shelters soon found themselves trapped, the shelters filled with smoke and heat until the air was gone. Many ran toward the Sumida River, thinking water would save them. It didn't. The riverbanks were crowded shoulder to shoulder, people gasping for air. Some jumped into the water and drowned. Others burned as oil and debris floated on the surface. From above, the pilots could see the firestorm pulling their planes downward. The turbulence was so violent that it threw men from their seats. Some crews could smell the burning even from thousands of feet above. By 2 a.m., the firestorm had consumed everything within miles. Districts vanished. Landmarks disappeared. The city center had become a furnace with no clear edge, only fire, wind, and death. By 1 a.m., the firestorm had spread through the eastern half of Tokyo. There was nowhere left to run. The wooden homes burned like paper, and the air itself turned against the people trying to breathe it. Thousands tried to flee toward the canals and open spaces, but the heat and smoke blinded them. Whole families ran together, clutching what little they could carry, until the fire caught them. Those who stayed in their shelters soon learned that underground offered no safety. The bombed air raid shelters turned into ovens. People suffocated where they hid. The fire spread so fast that even those outside could not escape it. The wind was so strong it picked up burning debris and flung it through the air like arrows. Roofs tore off and landed blocks away, still burning. Horses broke free from stables and ran through the flames. In the narrow streets, crowds of people moved as one mass, pushing forward until the heat from the front stopped them cold. Eyewitnesses later said the city sounded alive, not from screams, but from the roar of fire and collapsing buildings. Every breath burned. Many fled to the Sumida River, thinking it would save them, but even the water was deadly. The fire sucked oxygen from the surface, and the river boiled in places. People tried to climb onto bridges, but the bridges themselves were burning. By the time the flames passed, tens of thousands lay dead along the riverbanks. No one controlled the city anymore. The fire was the only force that mattered. Above the flames, American airmen fought to keep their planes steady. They had trained for bombing runs, not for flying through a furnace. The updrafts were so strong that the B-29s rose hundreds of feet without throttle power, then dropped again when the air collapsed beneath them. Pilots shouted over the radios to stay level. The turbulence was so violent that some crews hit their heads on the cabin ceilings. The smoke reached more than 20,000 feet. It was thick, black, and filled with sparks. Some crews flew through it blindly, their instruments useless. The smell of burning reached into the cabins. One gunner later wrote that it was like flying over a volcano. Others said they could feel the heat on their faces through the glass. There was no resistance from the ground anymore. The few anti-aircraft guns that fired had long since gone silent. Japanese fighters never reached the bombers. It was not a battle, it was destruction from above. Radio chatter was short and clipped. On target, release, get clear. Each crew followed its route and then turned for home, leaving the next group to fly through the same hell. The The glare from Tokyo was so bright that pilots hundreds of miles away could see it on the horizon. For many crews, it was their first time over Japan. They didn't know the city. They didn't see faces or hear screams. All they saw was the glow spreading across the map below. When they turned for the long flight back to the Mariana Islands, the ground beneath them looked like a single red wound stretching to the sea. By 2 a.m., most of eastern Tokyo no longer existed. Districts like Asakusa, Honjo, and Fukagawa, areas packed with small homes, factories, and markets, were gone. Over 16 square miles of the city were burning at once. The streets had melted. Fire engines were useless. Hospitals were destroyed or full of burned victims with no water, no medicine, and no power. Police and soldiers tried to help civilians escape, but the roads were blocked by debris and bodies. The command system failed completely. There was no communication, no coordination. In some areas, people lay flat on the ground, covering themselves with wet cloths and praying for the wind to shift. Others crawled into ponds or canals, only to find them filled with boiling water or dead bodies. The firestorm created a vacuum, air rushing inward faster than anyone could breathe. Those caught in open spaces suffocated as flames closed around them from all sides. At the Sumida River, survivors huddled on boats and rafts. Many were burned alive when the river caught fire. Witnesses later described the sky as white, brighter than day, with ash falling like snow. The smell carried for miles beyond the city limits. By the time the fires began to slow, more than 100,000 people were dead. Entire neighborhoods had vanished, leaving nothing but twisted metal and black ash. The government in Tokyo could not even count the dead. There were too many. Officials simply marked whole districts as lost. What had once been the largest city in Asia was now an open grave. By dawn, the bombers were gone. They turned south, flying back across the Pacific toward their bases in the Marianas. The crews were silent. Some had been awake for 15 hours. Others were too numb to speak. From their rear windows, the glow of Tokyo still filled the horizon. At Tinian, Saipan, and Guam, the ground crews waited. General Curtis LeMay stood by the operations board, counting each plane that returned. Of the 334 that left, 279 made it back. 14 crashed from mechanical failure, and several ditched into the ocean. Japanese defenses had barely touched them. When the last aircraft landed, LeMay read the damage reports. His strategy had worked. Nearly 16 square miles of Tokyo were destroyed. An estimated 100,000 people killed. Over 1 million left homeless. It was the most destructive single air raid in history. The crews were debriefed and sent to rest. There was no celebration. Most were too exhausted to process what they had done. Some described the mission as a success. Others said it was a nightmare. On the other side of the ocean, Tokyo was silent. The government radio stopped broadcasting. The emperor had not yet been told the full scale of what happened. Hospitals and police stations were gone. Even the fire department no longer existed as a functioning unit. When American intelligence reviewed the aerial photographs days later, they showed what everyone already knew. The capital of Japan had been burned out of existence. The only thing still standing across large parts of the city were concrete walls and brick chimneys surrounded by endless black. The firebombing of Tokyo had ended in one night, but its impact would last forever. When the sun rose on March 10, the city was gone. Thick smoke still covered the sky. The wind had died, leaving a heavy, chemical smell hanging over what used to be Tokyo. The rivers were filled with debris and bodies. The canals had boiled dry in places, leaving blackened shapes where people had tried to escape. Survivors walked through the ruins in silence. Many were barefoot, clothes burned away. The ground was still hot. There was no sound of birds or traffic, only the crackle of cooling metal and collapsing walls. People searched the ashes of their homes for anything familiar: a pot, a photograph, a fragment of cloth. Most found nothing. Emergency crews began to enter the city, but there was little they could do. Water mains were destroyed. Roads were gone. Telephone lines had melted. The few doctors who survived worked in open air, treating burns with rags and rainwater. Police tried to count the dead, but there were too many to record. In some districts, entire blocks had disappeared, no houses, no streets, only ashes and brick outlines where families once lived. By evening, the fires were mostly out. The official reports estimated over 100,000 dead, though the true number may never be known. More than 1 million people were homeless. Entire neighborhoods, schools, and factories were wiped off the map. Tokyo, a city that had taken centuries to build, had been destroyed in a single night. The firebombing of Tokyo was not an accident or an uncontrolled escalation. It was planned. By early 1945, the U.S. had learned that high-altitude bombing was failing. Japan's factories were small, spread out, and hidden among homes. Bombing military targets made little difference, so General Curtis LeMay changed tactics. Instead of aiming at factories, he targeted the neighborhoods that supported them. Instead of explosive bombs, he used incendiaries, napalm, and magnesium that would burn everything in their path. He ordered the B-29s to fly low and drop as much fire as possible on densely packed wooden districts. The goal was to cripple Japan's ability to fight and to break civilian morale. It was a decision shaped by calculation, not emotion. LeMay later said, "If we lose the war, we'll be tried as war criminals." But the order stood. Tokyo was chosen first because it was Japan's largest industrial area and the heart of its government. The success of the March 9 raid led to more attacks. In the months that followed, 66 Japanese cities were firebombed using the same method. By the time the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, most of urban Japan was already gone. The ethics of the firebombing have been debated ever since. Some argued it ended the war faster and saved lives that would have been lost in an invasion. Others called it unnecessary and inhuman. What cannot be denied is its scale. The Tokyo raid killed more people in one night than either atomic bomb that followed. It showed what modern warfare had become: total, impersonal, and capable of destroying entire populations without a single soldier stepping on the ground. After the firebombing, Tokyo slowly rebuilt. The survivors started with almost nothing: no homes, no tools, no food. They cleared rubble by hand and lived in makeshift huts built from burned tin and scrap wood. Relief teams brought water and rice. The smell of smoke lingered for months. The government called the attack a tragedy but urged people to keep working. Rebuilding began even before the war ended. When Japan finally surrendered in August 1945, Tokyo was still a city of ruins, but the people were alive and rebuilding again. In the years that followed, concrete replaced wood. Streets were widened, rivers cleaned, and new laws required fire-resistant buildings. The Tokyo of today stands on the same ground, but the memories of that night are still present in small memorials, in museums, and in the stories passed down quietly within families. The raid on Tokyo was the single deadliest air attack in history. In a few hours, it erased a city and changed the future of warfare. It proved that fire alone could destroy an empire. When historians look back, they see more than numbers. They see a turning point, the moment when industrial war reached its human limit. The B-29s returned to their bases. The flames went out. The war continued. But for the people of Tokyo, time stopped that night. As one survivor later said, "The sky fell on us, and when it lifted, there was nothing left." The firebombing of Tokyo was not just another battle. It was a warning of what happens when war loses all restraint.